Well, hello, and welcome to the Moodle podcast, where we talk about the future of learning without pretending it's already figured out.
And joining us today is Fred Dixon, who is the CEO of Blindside Networks, co-founder of BigBlueButton, which is a Moodle certified integration. Fred's here to chat about his views on the human side of digital learning, how we can move from access to agency when it comes to learning using educational technology like an LMS and virtual classrooms. And hopefully in all of that, we will cover all a range of aspects, including AI, including digital sovereignty, all the good stuff. So, Fred, welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You spent well over a decade advocating for a very specific vision of the virtual classroom, and you've said there should be no back of the classroom in a virtual space, in a digital world. Where does the student go when they're hiding, in your view, and why is this a bad thing, and why is it your mission to make that hiding place impossible to find?
Yeah, so look, if you're listening to this, I want you to think about the last time you're on a Zoom or a Teams call, and there was some transfer of information, someone was hoping you would learn something, and you maybe didn't have your webcam, and you were sitting there, and after about 20 minutes, it was like, oh my God, this is really hard to follow. And then it's done maybe in an hour. You maybe were in a workforce training and you say, yeah, I was there for an hour. And then a day later, you couldn't recall anything, right? It just didn't stick. We all have the experience of watching YouTube videos. Should a training or an online class be similar to a YouTube video? No, that would be horrible and a waste of time. So I, as the co-founder of BigBlueButton, and BigBlueButton is a virtual classroom platform designed to ensure every student learns. And the way we did that was we built in tools for active learning and live analytics to ensure the teacher has insight on what students are doing without kind of doing the Ferris Bueller, anyone, and maybe there's a class of 20 and 2 people are sharing webcams. I always laugh when I look at the virtual classes that are taught with Teams or Zoom, and they're like, well, I have webcams. Well, of course you do. That's all the platform provides you, right? It's all up to you as the instructor. So the place where BigBlueButton started from, it's actually 17 years now, was that passive learning is horrible, whether it be in the physical classroom or online. It's even more challenging online. Active learning is way better. Brain science shows that you can take notes, you can reread content, you can re-listen to things. None of that really affects actual learning. It's only when you actually do work. So like going to a gym, you could look at the weights and leave, and we would all agree nothing's going to happen to your muscles. You could show up at a class and you could listen for an hour and maybe your brain changes. Probably not. So the foundation on which BigBlueButton is active learning. And that means that you have activities you do during the class. And I think we'll get into this a little bit more later on, is that there's analytics to guide the instructor. And the role of the instructor or educator is so important to this whole process. And I think there's certainly some commonwealth there between what we look at as a role instructor and what Moodle looks at the role instructor. But yeah, it's from a place of active learning. We try to design BigBlueButton to support that.
So that's really more about participation than visibility, right? It's not just enough to have your webcam turned on and be in the Zoom or whatever it is, or the BigBlueButton, ideally. It's about something more than that. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about that active part?
So there's 2 components to it. One is the teacher is constantly starved for information, right? So you can read the room in a physical class, but in an online class, we're like, are you there? Can I see you through the keyhole? Yeah, there's some of that going on, right? So to reduce the dependency on webcams, and webcams is really important for building relationships. I think you would argue that any time in your life that you have been influenced by an educator, it was because you had some sort of connection with them. They were aware of you, they cared about you. So there's this humanistic part of us. So there's one. And the second is the teacher, they have a curriculum, there's some information that they need to make sure that you're learning. Active learning today, we would send you off to Kahoots or Nearpod or Peer Deck, right? So a lot of schools would say, look, I'll use Teams or Zoom, but I'll complement it with all these third-party products like all everyone else does. What does that tell you? Tell you is the platform that you're using has no idea what you're trying to do. It's just like, I gave you your webcams. What more do you want from me? Go use third-party tools. Go bleed out student data to third-party tools. So BigBlueButton says, no. The platform doesn't understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the students to engage in active learning. That means you're quizzing, polling, breakout rooms, shared notes, multi-user whiteboard. And these are built in, number one. And the second is when the students are using them, BigBlueButton has visibility in all the activity. So it surfaces that activity to the instructor. And what this does is it gives you two dimensions for looking at what the students are doing in your class. And what are you trying to do? You're trying to help them learn, right? So the role of the educator is to encourage, to support, to challenge, to reward, to model, to provide leadership, right? To ensure the students do some purposeful learning. So you get these sort of two axes to go to the root of your questions, like what does BigBlueButton do? Provides you visibility into what students are actually active. If you decline to talk or chat or raise your hand or respond to a poll, you will be less active than others. And instead of cognitively trying to think about, I'm looking at a class of 25 people, of which I see 5 webcams in Zoom, who here is not active? It's an impossible. There's just, teacher would not be able to do it while teaching the curriculum, but we'll tell you who's active by like an activity score. So you can decide, are there people that are kind of trying to fly under the radar? And that's where we say there's no back of the classroom in BigBlueButton. You cannot hide. I often joke with people that, if an instructor says to somebody, hey, Dan, look, go ahead and respond to polls. It's okay if you make mistakes. It's how you learn. And Dan, if you were only familiar with Teams and Zoom and you weren't showing your webcam in BigBlueButton, you'd be like, what? I'm not showing my webcam. How is it possible the teacher is not aware of me? It's because we don't rely on webcams. We'll give you the teacher gives you data. And we'll also give you data in terms of how well students are doing on any low stakes and formal quizzes. So you have these two axes. You have, okay, are they doing well on the quizzing and how active they are? And with that, you can get a pretty good spread of students. You just want everybody doing the quizzing. Doesn't matter if you learn it or if you are right or not. It's the act of doing it that's important. And we tie all this activity into BigBlueButton. We make it part of the platform. We surface the analytics to the instructor, and we guide them like a co-pilot in terms of like, okay, if there's any students here that may be flying under the radar or maybe struggling a bit, we'll do our best to give you insight on who those are so that you can make the change where it matters most in the moment.
And this ties in. So last month we had Liz on talking about digital capital and the digital divide, and often that's framed as kind of a hardware problem, access to laptop or even kind of to technical skills. But this is about enabling the educators to give confidence, to give support, to give kind of experience to those students in their learning, to give them some agency as well.
Yeah, the way I look at it is you won't really notice the difference with BigBlueButton until you notice the absence of it. So if any time we can take someone who's familiar with Teams or Zoom and Meet and bring them into BigBlueButton and show them how much engagement you can do and what the analytics you can do and how easy and fluid it is, and tell them, okay, now go back, Teams and Zoom. They'd be like, well, wait a minute, I don't want to give this up, right? There's a difference here which I wasn't aware of before. That's a very analytical, pedagogically focused, active learning, active recall, spaced repetition, foundation of which we try to build BigBlueButton. So these are not just, hey, we did 49 webcams, what more do you want to do? Like, no, we really thought through what has to happen in the classroom for the student to actually have increased learning outcomes and what support the instructor or the educator needs to best enable that. And from that point of view, we came to many different conclusions than what a Teams or Zoom would do.
I think, too, another way it ties into our topic last month with the digital divide is, Fred mentioned when you're doing it with Teams or Zoom, you have all these third-party connectors, right, for the polling and for all the other little tidbits. And I think about all the time we waste in meetings for people to connect to things like that and how much harder it is for someone with low digital capital to manage multiple logins and going to various websites while they're also trying to manage their video conferencing session, too. It just feels like we're exponentially requesting, hey, be simultaneously engaged in 5 different platforms to be present in one platform. Feels unintuitive, to say the least.
And such is the world that a lot of people teach because they think, well, everyone else does it, so it must be the right way to do it. And it's not. It's horrible, So it would be like trying to run your school on WordPress. It looks good, but it knows nothing about education. You would not run your school on WordPress. You would use an LMS like Moodle. So why are we teaching virtual classrooms with a tool that is designed for meeting? And the goal is not to meet, it is to learn. So if the platform supports you, you just have a much better experience, and teachers have a better experience, students have a better experience.
I want to continue on this kind of like digital capital thread, just to like, again, tie it back to last month's topic, because that's been really rattling around for me. So when a learner logs in but doesn't feel like they belong in a space, what should the design of that space be doing differently to your way of thinking?
When you as a student come into a class, right, we are going to learn best when we apply ourselves, called purposeful struggle, when we have a chance to do some activity, measure the results, and assess them, right? So that's Bloom's taxonomy. The idea is that we're building up the heart pyramid, and that we have a range of skills that we can do. So pick any topic that you're learning, any language, any math, science, or so on. There is a range of things that you can do on your own to learn, right? So you can do micro learning, you can read something, you can try something on yourself. But it turns out there's this range of learning, and the most efficient learning is at the upper range. And it's kind of like a workout in the gym. You know, you could have a casual workout, but your muscles are going to respond. But man, if you have a trainer that is pushing you and you're sweating and they're screaming more, give you one more rep, right? You have a really good workout. Sweat a bit more. The same thing happens with learning. And that is, there's a zone of learning. That's Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. It's a very big phrase, but all it means is this. If something's too easy, you don't think. 2 + 2? Anybody? 4? If something's too hard, 327 + 468. Okay, that might be a bit hard. But in the middle, there's this zone. And at the upper end of the zone, the most efficient way you can learn, turns out you can only learn it with the help of others. And we know this, right? It's a tutor. It's a teacher. It's a mentor. It's a coach, right? Nobody gets to be the best at something without having mentorship. And we all want to be the best at what we're doing. That upper end of the zone, you can only get there through others. And what does that mean? It means that you rely on the interaction with others, helping each other out, having others give you feedback, the teacher. What is that social environment called? It's social constructivism. And that is the foundation of Moodle. So we, as a synchronous component, do provide a platform for social constructivism, where the teacher's goal is to get the students to do very specific, like scaffolding, and immediately get them to apply, monitor what they're doing, either in a group, breakout rooms, or together, see students who may be struggling, and give them feedback in the moment. And ideally, you get students struggling at the level of each of their individual abilities. That's the even harder part to do, right? So we all want each other to be at the upper end. If you can pull that off, if you can have students say, man, I showed up for Mrs. Anderson's class and she just works us so hard. Well, you're probably going to do better on your tests than you would if you like, oh, I showed up at class. It's like, oh, I just record it now. I don't really do it. So I'm on this mission to hopefully convince students that when they show up at a class, they should be prepared to struggle, purposeful struggle. They should be prepared to help each other out. They should be prepared to work knowing that the teacher is there to put like the finger under the bar and get that last rep out. And if you can build an environment like that, it's way better than I'm going to show up in a Zoom, I'm going to listen for an hour, and I did the class. I attended. Yeah, you went in, you looked at the weights, you walked out. Nothing happened to your muscles, nothing really happened to your brain. Waste of time for everybody. I think it could just be that much better. And that's the fundamentals of what we think about when we wonder how can we enable that to happen, and we just fade in the background. We, the platform.
And you said just before we came on live that you've been spending a lot of time recently imagining the future of all of this and going deep into what AI kind of affords us here. What's your thinking there?
Yes. So if I just build on those fundamentals, I would say that you can think of there's 3 types of classes that you could have. You could have a class which is passive, right? I go into a Teams or Zoom call. I'm really slagging Teams or Zoom here, so sorry if anyone works at Teams or Zoom. But hey, I don't think you have the best product for teaching and learning, so call me on the mat, challenge me. Passive learning does not work. If it did, we would have had much better outcomes during COVID. And this is panning out. I can watch a dozen YouTube videos and something. Nothing happens until I really sit down and start doing something and making mistakes. You can have active learning, which is like you actively doing things, which is way better. And then you can have this upper end, which is like the authentic engagement between you and somebody else. Somebody is in this class, usually the educator, who is aware of you and cares about you and is going to hold you accountable, right? And now the learning happens, right? I show up to learn English or Spanish because I'm going to go and talk Spanish for an hour and I'm going to be able to do it. This now washes up against the world that we are in with AI. So what does this mean? Well, there are two roles in the class. There's the learner and the educator. And let me say first and foremost, the educator has to do a lot of administrative stuff. They have to create curriculum, they have to create rubrics, they have to create content, quizzes. Bring on the AI. Help them do that more efficiently, right? Obviously, don't go as far as you just farm it out and the student's like, hey, this assignment looks like it's just generated with AI. No, you want to save as much time as you can for the educator. To what end? Well, what does the learner need? Does the learner need AI? And here's where Fred is going to take maybe a contrarian opinion. When you walk into the classroom, physical or virtual, the last thing you need to do is have an AI on your desk. And the reason is that it will offload the real thinking that has to happen. Purposeful struggle is struggle. And I'll use a gym analogy because we got this wrong somewhere along the way. If you go into the gym and you're lifting the weights and you feel some reaction in your body, your muscles are going to feel a certain way. What's that sensation you feel like when you're in the gym and you're having a really good workout? What do your muscles feel like?
Pain. It feels like pain, honestly.
Well, okay. Pain is one. Burn is another, right? You get the burning of the muscles, like feel the burn. And that tells you, your muscles are basically telling you, look, I have extended beyond my normal capabilities. You are pushing me, just FYI. A lot of people who are like addicted to it, it's like, yeah, game on, let's do this. I'm going to walk out of there. I'm going to come back stronger. I'm going to do it all over again. And 3 months, 6 months, it's just inevitable. Your body will respond. You'll just get stronger. Basically, there's two parts of learning. There's a state where you do not know something. And then there's a state where you've mastered something. Pick anything you want to learn. What is the feeling in between that state? And I'll just say the feeling that most people feel is frustration, right? So I'm in a class. I have turned off all my computers. I have closed a textbook. I am now trying to work on something that the instructor has given me. And I feel frustrated. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. I don't know this. Why is this so hard? It'd be so much easier if I look at the textbook. Somehow we equated that. And that is the feeling of the burn, right? Your brain is woken up. Daniel Keenan came up with this system 1, system 2 thinking. System 1 is like instant thinking, like what's 2 + 2? It's 4. I don't have to think about it. System 2 is like the brain has to wake up. It actually has to do stuff. The brain is lazy. It takes energy and so on, right? So your muscles are lazy too. So you want to be in that mode where you're like feeling frustrated, and AI will take all that frustration away. That is the problem right now. Teachers should have AI to create more time for authentic engagement with the students. But the slippery slope for the students, and the way I phrase it is this, the road to cognitive offloading is paved with AI. The more you use AI, the less you are going to learn. Who amongst us does not now make sure their GPS is on when you leave your driveway? Why? Because you're just become cognitively dependent on the GPS, right? Our brains can do spatial. It's how we evolved to this point. The message I have that I will say it to anybody, if you are a learner, you are going to be learned best when you're in an environment where you are being challenged and pushed with purposeful struggle at the limit of your ability, with the assistance from others, under the guidance of an educator who is aware and cares about you and is going to be there to give you help so you are free to just push yourself as far as you can. If you can do that over and over again, you will have way better learning outcomes. And we just somehow got it wrong where the feeling of frustration causes people to think I'm doing something wrong. It's actually the feeling you want to get to. And you do that more effectively with others. And that's what social constructivism is.
How do you actually convince the student of that? Is the message literally what you've just said to them? Because if you set off in your car and your sole ambition is to get from A to B as quickly as possible, then of course you can disengage your brain and just follow the sat nav. If your goal is to learn how to get from A to B and to remember it, then you should switch that off. And that requires learners to make that distinction between I just want to get from A to B as quickly as possible versus I want this to really stick for the long term. And those kind of short term versus long term incentives are difficult to balance sometimes.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You use the right term, long-term and short-term incentives. Like, is the dopamine hit going to happen initially, or am I going to struggle for a while and the dopamine hit happens? So I think learners are uniquely challenged today to do this. And the problem is that technology is not conditioning them to feel this long-term payback for effort. Anything of significance that we do in life, the most rewarding thing is when it comes after a period of struggle, that you achieve something that maybe you didn't think you could do. And then you get that hit and you realize, I want to do that again and again. And I think people who have had the benefit, let's call it pre-phones, pre-cell phones, we had to learn things the old-fashioned way. But really, it was we lifted the weights, right? Our brains actually had to think. We were doing memorization, rote learning, building exercises, making presentations, writing essays. Like, that's how we built up the mental model of how to do things. And now I believe the challenge is, because your question is, how do you communicate that? Well, let's start first by the challenge they have. Social media, been around since 2010, let's call it 15 years, has made us anxious. COVID, which was around for 2 years or so, has made us isolated. TikTok has taken away our attention span, so that long-term, long-term delayed gratification is not there. And now we bequeath everybody, all learners in the world now have AI, which will lift the weights for you, right? So I think learners today are uniquely challenged because if they just follow all these things that I just talked about, they're not going to be in a state of mind where they're willing to like close the textbook and really do the learning. So what's the antidote to that? The homework apocalypse is among us, right? So take-home assignments have been hugely diluted, especially for learners who are competing for limited spots at a university or in a job, right? Dan, we were talking before the session, it's like doping in a sport, right? I mean, should I just learn everything without AI and everyone else is going to, represent that they know something when they don't, but they get the job? That's a really hard thing to make a learner, to make them challenged to do it. So I would say there are a couple antidotes to this. One is the most important person in this equation is the educator, right? Someone who can help them, encourage them, challenge them. Like, don't use AI. Don't show up my class without having done the work to, learn some basic Spanish, and then we'll get going with it. That's what you're here for. And the second is the mindset. So I think any of us who did well in school, the best experience was when we had to struggle. I think if school came too easy to somebody, it was probably didn't set them up for the grit that they needed later on in life when things didn't come easy. Because you can always find something that's more challenging. You're better served that in your formative years and K-12 and higher ed, you got pushed, you had to learn, you felt that I didn't know, I wasn't good enough, you worked through the imposter syndrome, and then you sat down and you did the work. You got the grades, you got the marks, you got that feeling of doing it. And I can share with you my personal approach to this, because we have a motto at Blindside Networks. Every day, the motto is, the learning never stops. I have never stopped learning. Like, building a virtual classroom platform is not easy. I did not pick something that was easy. So I'll share with you from a learner's point of view, I would advocate looking at learning in 3 phases. One is curiosity. If you can't awaken your brain to doing something, like, I'm genuinely curious right now, like, why is this not working? Or what's this problem? Or what am I supposed to learn? Or what does the essay say? Or what is the teacher trying to say? You have to kind of trick your brain into waking up. If you can do that, that curiosity will take you a certain path. And then the second phase, the hunt. I can smell the prey. I have enough clues. It's like, I can figure this out if I just push harder in it, right? It could be a math problem. It could be essay. I think I can get this right. The third phase is flow, right? So if you can get to a state where everything just flows around you and you lose track of everything and you're just in the problem, that is one of the most enjoyable states of mind you can get into. But think of all the things you have to get into it. So your question was, what can a learner do today? Go to a structured environment. Find a good educator. Do not allow yourself to not lift the weights. Push yourself and understand that this feeling of frustration you feel is the burn in your muscles. If you can trick your mind into saying, I want to feel frustrated, generate curiosity, think about the hunt. I mean, we're designed as hunters-gatherers, and then you will hit this state of flow. Best feeling in the world.
Yeah, excellent.
I have something perhaps a bit contrarian. That's a bit off script, but I'm reflecting, Fred, because my own educational experience, like I'm right at that age where the iPhone hit when I was like a sophomore in college. So I had like the really analog youth and high school and early college experience. And then and I remember my elders were always like, oh, kids these days have it so easy. You can go to the library on your laptop and look at all these papers, and you don't have to do like we did where you had to comb the stacks and find the physical pile of books and go get your citations. And oh, you won't ever be, like when I was a real little kid, you won't have a calculator in your pocket for the rest of your life, right? But actually, it turns out we fully do, right? So I see it from these like two perspectives, like this kind of like sense of, oh, well, everything's passive and isolated, and people aren't going to have, you're not doing the real work of building your brain and building your skills and learning things if you're partaking. But I feel like on the flip side of it, kids now see the systems at play and they see, okay, these are the systems, this is the game, these are the hoops I have to jump through. And I think that's a whole new and different and interesting kind of learning that learners are doing in the age of AI, where they're looking at this educational system that has maybe been built on and from the foundations of people going to physical libraries and only having access to the books that were in their little town. That formed our educational system, and it isn't really the case anymore, right? Like, so we have this education system that's built on this woefully outdated way that societies manage knowledge in an era when any question you have is answerable. You can find out something and get yourself started down a path of discovery through your own motivations when you're up against it, right? So I think I don't know. I don't know what I'm asking. Just that, like, isn't there something beautiful about the systems thinking and like the way that students are learning to game the system, right? And to get their diplomas or whatever without really memorizing when the Magna Carta was signed, because they can always just look that up. But instead, they have this overarching picture of, I have to jump through this hoop, so I have to do this, I have to engage the AI here. I think that's kind of cool and might lead to new things. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, so I think you're pointing out that we had to do things harder. God, back in the one-room schoolhouse, it was a chalkboard and a piece of chalk, right? And there was no paper, right? Giving people paper, the fact that, what was when writing came out, I forget which the philosopher said, like, okay, now we just write everything down. We don't have to remember anything, right? The death of learning. There is a certain amount of manual effort that we have to do that we don't need to do anymore. Going to the library is a good example. Finding a book for the sheer purpose of reading it. Can I just get to the book part? Because I just want to save that time. That is true. If I'm going to make something in my kitchen here, I don't have to grow the vegetables. I don't have to raise the cow. I can get the food. That was not the case, 50 or 100 years ago. But now we're at a place where we like to use the food analogy, we just have the buttons and food shows up. We don't cook food anymore, right? So we've been given the ability to have it easier to create, but we have also been given the opportunity to short circuit it altogether. And the food analogy is probably pretty good because we can realize it. Like, yeah, the food showed up on the door. I didn't cook it. The problem with learning is the point at which you cognitive offload is almost invisible to you, right? So it's the event horizon of learning. If I'm going to learn something, biologically, I cannot learn it unless I create new neural pathways in my brain. And biologically, I can't do that unless my brain wakes up and starts to like do some heavy lifting, feeling frustrated and so on. If I misinterpret the ease of using AI to make me to learn, I am essentially going into the gym and having my trainer or something lift the weights for me. And I've been measured my success by how many weights I can lift, not by what I learned. The problem with our educational society today, we measured it by weights that you can lift. It's a first order approximation. If you can write this essay or you can do this assignment, you must have learned something. But we've done it in an industrial, assembly line way, right? God, I wish when I was in school that every class had two teachers. One taught the class and the second one walked around and said, what can I do to help you learn? Because we were just all expected to learn it ourselves, figure it out ourselves, right? So I think that there is a lot more scaffolding to help you learn, but it is a slippery slope where it is so easy to cognitive offload because, you're going to take home assignment. There's 5 questions on it to do. I'll get it. I do the first one. You're done in 30 seconds. You're facing 10 minutes for each question. You're facing a full hour. It's an impossible choice to make. And, there was that famous experiment where a young kid is put into a room and there's an Oreo cookie on the table. The experimenter says, look, I just have to go out, but if I come back and the Oreo cookie is still there, I'll give you a second one. And it was, how strong could the child resist taking that Oreo cookie? Because it's right there, right? And there was an argument that this experiment showed the stronger that you were able to delay the gratification, this extrapolated to like, hey, I can probably do better in life if I can just not just grab the Oreo cookie right away. And if you eat Oreo cookies day, morning, and night, very predictable what happens, right? You're not going to feel good, you'll lose energy and so on. If you use AI morning, noon, and night, people say like, what's going to happen with learning with AI? Well, it's very predictable. If I just used AI morning, noon, and night to do all my assignments, I will learn nothing. And there was a really good early study done at MIT where they hooked up 48 students to an electroencephalogram where they had them once each month for 3 months write an essay. Group 1 could use ChatGPT. Group 2 could use Google, and Group 3 could not use anything. And they just looked at their brain. They didn't ask them, did you feel like you learned or not? And it was very predictable. Group 1, there was very little brain activity. The reviewers who reviewed the essays called them soulless. There's no insight in them. The second group used Google, a little bit more thinking. And the third group had to write the essays themselves. Much better essays, much better learning. They had to work harder. And then they did something very clever. They flipped it around. So group 1 was given, asked to write the essay themselves on the 4th time. And so did AI for the first 3 essays help them write the 4th one? No. When they had to write the essay by themselves, they couldn't remember what they wrote in the first ones because they didn't do it. They were no better off than they were before, and they struggled. Turns out, group 3, after writing the essays themselves, when they were given AI to assist in writing the 4th essay, they actually did better. And why is that? Isn't AI supposed to take away your learning? Well, they built up the mental models. AI was an assistant at that point. They weren't replacing. They had already built up the framework to do something. AI just assisted you. And that goes back to AI didn't force them to go to the library. It assisted them in providing the stuff, but they still did the work. I just think it's really hard for students to get it to do the work now when AI is like the Oreo cookie that if you just eat it, your brain will say, that was great, give me more. AI is like ultra processed foods for learning.
I think it's about clarifying those incentives, whether that is passing your school exams, passing your university exams, succeeding in the workplace, whatever you choose to do, recognizing that learning will be a constant through your professional life, and
Absolutely.
the success throughout that depends on you developing these skills, not just responding to the specific questions and not just providing the information, because that information is ubiquitous. But it's about demonstrating those success, because that's why people go to the gym. They build up their muscles because they want to achieve, they want the body, they want the physique, they want the sporting excellence, and success is measured over the long term, not over the short term.
Our educational system must change. It can't be an assembly line of learning where there was take-home assignments and there was one essay and there was one exam at the end. I mean, we learn best when we learn with each other. It should be, I'll say things I don't know if it's possible to pull them off, but it should be smaller groups, oral exams, more collaboration amongst the students and the educator, awaken the curiosity in the students, drill into them. Like nobody sat down with me and said, okay, hey, Fred, here's how your brain works. Okay, before you go through all the learning, let me just tell you how it works, right? We all very good at muscles works, right? Like, there's a certain limit at which you can work out, right? But you're all searching for that most efficient workout. I think we could do better educating learners of how your brain actually works. And then we could build the platforms to support the optimal learning. And let's tie it back to Moodle and to BigBlueButton, right? We're all both on a mission to build platforms to empower educators to improve our world. And that is, in many ways, I feel like we make musical instruments, right? So we can have the best virtual classroom platform. We can have the best LMS. We are still dependent upon who is going to use the platform. You can have an amazing piano, a Stradivarius. I can't play the violin, right? So I would not do very well with the violin. It doesn't matter how good of a violin is. I can't play the violin. right? We want educators who are really good at educating, and we're like the instrument that they can use. Um, and that students realize that the whole purpose of going through school wasn't just to get the marks, it was learning how to learn. It was build up that mental model so that when you did use AI, it complemented you, it extended you, it was a multiplier. 0 times something is still 0. If you know nothing, AI times 0 is still 0. You can do stuff to which in the workforce, yes, we are all incented to do things, but I'll go back to the motto, the learning never stops. The more that you understand how to do something, the better able you are going to be able to thrive in the world that comes. You can use tools better than anybody else. AI is a tool. Sure, people around you, but I one of my favorite teachers, and I never had inspirations was Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman was notorious for learning things from first principles. He was quoted once by saying, if I could just forget how to do a problem, I'd have the joy of doing it all over again and learning, right? So and he got it, right? He was very smart, but he got this method of like, I want to know things from first principles. So if we can cultivate in learners the concept that, hey, you are going to take a longer time up front, but man, the payoff is going to be in spades. If you short circuit, maybe you can get through. Maybe you can you can win this race by doping, and bicycles. We all look at it and look. There are many times the world does not celebrate someone who has learned things by first principles. I don't think anybody wants to see someone deliver a draft plan for a house using paper and pen. Those days have gone, right? But you still need to know that the person who signs off on the plan to architectural plan has the engineering skill. We are going into a different world. And I think the authentic engagement between the teacher and instructor, the educator and the learner is even more important. I wake up every day thinking about, man, what can I do to improve our world? If I can pull hard on this one lever that I've got, which is building a more effective virtual classroom, and maybe I can make it a platform that helps, educators be better, like spend more time with the learners, get them to do more things, get more insight. I think, and the fact that we didn't talk about open source, the fact that, like Moodle, we give BigBlueButton away to the world. If you're going to change the world, you're going to need to give something to the world. And so we decided early on that we were going to give BigBlueButton away for the purposes of like, okay, if everybody was using it, there would be entrepreneurial opportunities there, right? We can provide hosting, we can provide value-added products and services, we can do consulting effort, we can do support contracts. All of that is panned out. There are many activities going on in Europe right now for using open source more than ever before. And I think those platforms which have done a good job of building up are well positioned. I see Moodle as having a similar opportunity, which has been paid off. You guys recently passed, was it 500 million registered learners on Moodle's platform, right? So like, how big is that lever to pull, right? How big of an opportunity there is to empower educators to improve our world. And I look at it, this is a huge multiplier. Everything that Moodle does to improve its platform multiplies over all those educators and all those learners. Everything that BigBlueButton can do to make a virtual class environment more efficient and more effective for authentic engagement, the more people that we can empower, the more that they can use it as well, the more we can help improve our world. And I will say up front, like I view there's the asynchronous part in Moodle and the synchronous part of BigBlueButton. My goal is to figure out how to increasingly make those feel like one complete platform that understands the goal of the class, physical or virtual, is not to meet, it is to learn. If we can do that, UNESCO Software or Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality education for everybody. We are. I look at us as a supporting actor in that role. The main principles are the educators and learners, right? They have the stage. We are the supporting actors. But man, if we can be really good in our roles, we set the stage for them to be successful. And I just think that there's so many things that can be done to make that stage even better. And I think that there's so much distractions right now in the world, especially with AI, that it's really challenging for the educator because the things that they used to do for teaching are now gone away. The greatest tool they had for, if you're English, was to read someone's essay. It gave you insight into their thought process. That's that's largely missing now, except for when you get them to write it in a classroom where you've gone through a metal detector to make sure you have no AI. You go in and sit down on the desk. And I think the learner is challenged to misinterpret the shortcuts that AI can give you. It's cognitive offloading. To misinterpret the feeling of frustration, which is what your brain really needs to work to learn, and to misinterpret that the social environment which you learn is something to be taken advantage of to the full. Like, shouldn't show don't show up in class and not participate. It's just you're missing an opportunity to learn. And learning how to learn is really, you don't figure this out until after you've done all the marks and got the grade. But that was what the real thing I took out. I took a math degree. If you quoted me on what Green's theorem was, I couldn't tell you, but I had to do a lot of work along the way, and that paid off later on. I know if I put myself into a position where I have to work on something for long periods of time, it paid off before. I may not make it always. If I'm banging up against the wall, it's nice to have an educator around to just kind of give me that hint in the way, but they can make it in the future. And that's the world we're living in. I think Moodle and BigBlueButton have a really important role to play in that world, and a really important message of like, man, the first time someone tells you that AI will make learning easier, you should just like, whoa, I'm calling you out, because that's not how it works. You're telling me I can go in the gym and I can lift less weights and I will have a better result. I'll buy that if it's paired with a very good knowledge of how my muscles work, so that the workout could be more efficient, but I still have to lift the weights. And I think in the world, we're going to hear a lot of things about AI, everything's AI, what's your AI story? And if I can give one message to the people listening to this, is just ask yourself, is it going to make learning easier, or is it going to make learning more efficient? You can go for efficiency, right? You can compress an hour workout down to 40 minutes. You're going to sweat more. But if someone else lifts the weights, it's theater of you're wasting your time. And the same thing is, learners to understand that, it can be more efficient, but you still have to think. And thinking is very pleasurable experience if you can get to a state of flow. And we're the supporting actors in that play.
Well, thank you so much. You certainly got my brain, muscles in my brain working today. Lots to chew on there. Fred, tell us before we go, where are you going to be? You're often on the road talking about this kind of thing in person. Where can people catch you?
So look, we have an online community with BigBlueButton. You can go to, we actually recently launched, we have bigbluebutton.org in the open source. We recently launched bigbluebutton.com. That's more on the commercial side. So I do wear two hats. I'm in the open source community, like doing a lot of the project management, the evangelism for BigBlueButton. And I have my CEO hat on, where I'm trying to, realize all the entrepreneurial opportunities that an open source project creates, because you create a two-sided market. You have people who want to use it and people who are looking for, and then they're looking for service providers who can help you use it. We're on the service provider side. You can find me on LinkedIn at Fred Dixon. If anything I said about pedagogy and theory and learning and what we're happening, if you're interested to chat about it, I'd be interested to talk to you, like reach out. And in terms of online, every year we do our BigBlueButton World Conference, which is an online conference on BigBlueButton, using BigBlueButton, about BigBlueButton. And so if you have an idea that you'd like to present about, you'll see some notices go out about, we welcome people to get something you want to share, like in a 25-minute presentation. Yeah, just find me online at LinkedIn. My email, ffdixon@blindsidenetworks.com on the business side, and ffdixon@bigbluebutton.org on the open source side.
And you can connect with Fred in the links in the show notes, or just visit him at blindsidenetworks.com. Thanks for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.